I'm Jeremy Vance, and this is the FAQing Security Podcast. Okay, welcome back to the FAQing Security Podcast with me, Jeremy Vance, your host. This is basically where we take FAQs and other questions that get asked, and I try to do what I can to share that knowledge with anybody who's interested to learn about it. Just kind of some house cleaning. So in the next month, we actually do have a couple guests hopefully coming on. We have specifically trying to get a basketball player on that will actually talk about defense in basketball and how that's important and how that relates as a metaphor or analogy to site perimeter electronic security. And then we'll also be trying to schedule a time to have a conversation with one of my friends that is very big into future tech and R&D and all that fun. So hopefully that'll be coming out in the next month with the next two episodes after this one. And then we can kind of go from there. Now for this episode, what we're going to be talking about, because we are currently in what is supposed to be Cyclone Alfred. It didn't really do much as far as here in Brisbane, as it kind of just petered out. We had a few hours of storm last night, and then now it's basically back down to calm. It looks like it's been downgraded as well too at this point. What I will try to do is, if you watch the full video of this on YouTube, I will actually try to overlay the podcast video over the top of my time lapse that I recorded of the storm out this window right there. So you might be able to see behind me. Maybe not, but I have a TIOC that has been recording the whole time. Actually does really good as far as night vision. If you don't know what a TIOC is, it's a DAWA security camera that is one of the workhorse cameras we use. So it's a really good active deterrence camera, has siren strobes, all that fun stuff. Good camera, decent for taking high-res video because it's obviously 4K. We'll time lapse it out of that, and hopefully we'll have that as the background for this video. So you can check that out while you're listening to me ramble on about our topic today, which is power loss. We've been putting out posts specifically all week as we've led into the cyclone regarding power loss and how power loss affects security systems and all of that other fun stuff. So we're talking security systems, camera systems, access control systems, specifically. Other things that will be related will be like your intercoms, your internet data systems, things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question, the first FAQ for today is, what happens to your security system specifically when your site loses power? Now, again, if you ever follow my socials, by all means, go follow my socials. We put out posts leading up to the cyclone of what to expect, and we're kind of going to go over that today. So the first thing when your site loses power is anything that does not have a battery or UPS backup is going to go down. Now, the most common items for this are your camera system and possibly your internet. So both of those will usually run off of a UPS that is in a data rack. So if you have your camera system in a data rack with the internet and the power goes out and you do not have backup power, those systems are shutting down, which means that your camera system is not recording. It means that it's not sending video out to remote access for your phone app, or if you have a control room, they can't see it anymore. The internet also drops if you don't have backup 4G for your security system or your internet. That means that your internet is done as well. So the remote access to your site is pretty much finished at that point. This is not overly the end of the world for your security system, which we'll talk about in a second, but for your camera system and access to the internet from your LAN NBN connection, you're pretty much done, right? It's not over. Now, for the security system, so we're talking your alarm system and your access control system, those have a bit more redundancy built in. So every access control and alarm system comes with battery backup ability, and I do not know a single security integrator who puts in alarm systems that do not have the batteries in place to back it up. Now, These batteries are not last you a week batteries. They can be anything from a couple hours if you have access control to 8 hours if it's just a couple PIRs. So that will vary. And quite honestly, it's probably worth doing a little bit of a stress test on that. But the more stuff you have, the faster it's going to drain the battery. For communication from your alarm system and your access control system, and all intents and purposes, those are usually the exact same thing. I know a couple places like schools will put a TCOM in for the alarm, and then they'll put in the protege for the access control. But for most cases, those are exactly the same system. If you have a T4000 or a Permacon, and there's a couple other options there too, but those are the two ones I mainly use. Those are your 4G SIMs. They'll usually have a Telstra SIM and an Optus SIM, and they report back to the control room. The way that those are meant to be installed is they will run directly into the battery backup of the alarm system. So when the power goes out, that 4G communication will still work as long as that battery lasts. So what happens from a control room side? So when we are in the control room and we get the alarms from your site, when the power goes out, if everything is configured properly, we should first get an AC loss alarm. So the system should go through, kick that alarm to the T4000 of the Permacon, which then kicks that alarm to the control room and says, hey, we've lost power. Now the control room will do a couple different things depending on what your action plan is with them. Sometimes they will wait an hour to see if the power will restore. And then other times, if it's a high security site, they'll action it right away and give you a call. Keep in mind, they will not be able to see the cameras if your camera and internet connection are not battery backed up with a UPS. So it kind of falls back to the traditional, we get a text alarm and we action it. And usually that action is we call the client. If the client doesn't pick up, we'll send a patrol. All right. Some clients will have just send a patrol, but for the most part, you should get a call. If you don't pick up, they'll send a patrol. If you do pick up, and it's something like a cyclone where you know there's a power outage, my suggestion is don't have them send a patrol. Just, it's kind of a known issue. Just weather the storm. If it's a perfectly calm night in a weird situation, at that point, you can let them know, hey, that's a bit unusual. Please send a patrol and check it out. They'll send a driver out there to look at it and physically verify the site. Now, that power alarm, so the AC loss, is not the end of the world. That just means the power is out. The next alarm that comes through, whether it's a couple hours later or 8 hours later, is a low battery alarm. Now, the low battery alarm is basically, so we have the AC loss alarm, we have time period, and then we have a low battery alarm. So that alarm is telling us, hey, the system's about to lose its battery backup. When we get that alarm, we will then normally call you instantly because it's just, we have to let you know, right? From a control room point of view, we have to let you know that your system is about to fail and you're not going to have monitoring anymore. Again, if it's a cyclone, which you can kind of see the rain in the background here, which is mostly all it is, you really don't have much of a choice. Just let it fail. It's not going to be the end of the world. When the power comes back on, the system will turn back on and all of the batteries, if they're healthy, will start to recharge again and all the low battery alarms will restore. In theory, everything should restore and you should be able to go back to life as normal. Now, we had a couple years back, there was in Brisbane in particular, where we are, obviously because of the cyclone, we did have a flood. And that flood specifically hit a site pretty hard where basically everything got wet, went down and all that stuff. The power outage on the alarm system wasn't overly an issue. Everything was flooded. Again, it's not like we have to deal with looters on an everyday basis here. The site itself was okay. It was just flooded. Now, the next question we have is, how did different doors react to power loss? So the site that was hit during this flood had a front door that was a maglock. And this is another post that we've put out prepping for the cyclone because it's not just them that have this problem. So the different types of doors. if you just want to go basic, right? We have an electric strike, which is your normal, it looks like a door handle. There's in the frame, you have a device that actually clicks open and closes. When the door shuts, it's locked. You swipe, the door clicks open, you push open, right? It's almost like a normal lock for layman's term. A mag lock is a big magnet that sits at the top of the door, and it is basically power and energized, and that locks the door. When you swipe, the magnet loses power, the door opens, you go in, it re-energizes, the door shuts, it locks again. So if you have a mag lock and the power goes out, that door is no longer locked. Basically, that door is open. So in this case of the flood, they lose power. The access control system loses power quite quickly because mag locks take a lot of power. And at that point in time, the door to their business is just open. So we need to kind of keep that in mind. Now, I had a conversation with a colleague on socials recently, and he was talking about how his thing is he doesn't like putting mag locks on front doors or perimeter doors, and that's 100% accurate. That is the answer, but it's not always possible. So what we do try to find is doors or be able to put in things where you can key lock those doors. So if your patrol company or your monitoring company has the keys to your site, at that point in time, power outage, low battery alarm, we could send a patrol, take the key, and lock the front door, right? That way the door is not just going to swing open as the power drops. It's important to know how those different doors work. Now, the electric strikes have two different functions. So again, mag locks are your big magnets that are up top of the door. You lose power, they're going to open. That's just what it is. They do make some cool ones that are actually like drop lever ones, which are neat. They're a bit on the pricey side, but if you're in something that you actually have money to spend, those are actually really cool, but not super common. The normal door locks, so the ones that are where the door actually comes in and the tongue of the door goes into the lock, just think of like a normal door, but it's access control and made to be automated. Those ones come in two different fashions. So you have fail safe and you have fail secure. Fail secure is when you lose power, the door is locked. You have to use a key to get in. Fail safe is when you lose power, the door is unlocked and anybody can get in and out. Now, different reasons for using those. Perimeter doors are almost always fail secure. When you lose power on a perimeter door, you want the door to lock and you want the person to need to use a key to get into the door. Fail safe, you can think of this more as comms rooms doors or internal office doors, something to where if you lose power, you can actually still get in the door to do things. Now, interestingly enough, I have a specific story about this. So we have a client, a decently large client in Melbourne, that had a power outage during the day. Now they had staff everywhere, the doors on the perimeter doors were all open, everything was fine. But because they had a power outage, the comms room door actually failed to fail secure. So we couldn't get into the comms room to actually fix a blown power supply that was causing the power outage. We ended up having to actually get up on a ladder into the false ceiling, go in and actually use a battery basically to energize the lock to open it and then get in that way. So we were able to get around it, but it became a much larger job than if it was just a fail-safe. So when you're designing your system with your security consultant, make sure that you're going through these options. Access control is an amazing, wonderful thing. Honestly, it helps keep sites secure, which physical security leads to good cyber security, which leads to good overall security. I can't stress that enough, especially as you kind of come out of the small business realm. But make sure you're going through and getting these things covered. You don't want these things to be unknown. So there. The final thing to really talk about are like roller doors and gates, things where we're using the access control to actually trigger a relay. Normally these things are not firing on high level integration. Normally they're fairly low level. You have your motor on your roller door or your gate. The access control system is just turning on a light switch. It's either on or off. and then it's actually affecting the way that just triggering a relay on the door safe. Think of like your remote for your garage door, right? The important thing with this is if you turn the power back on or the power comes back on, let's say the gate is supposed to be open because it's on a schedule. Sometimes the way that motor is going to take that input is that it hasn't changed state, so the gate will go close and the gate will stay closed. Now, in a lot of access control systems, you won't be able to reopen that gate with the button because the access control system thinks the gate's open, even though the gate's closed. So it's not going to turn that relay back on because it thinks the relay is already on. So what you would do in that situation is you actually go into the access control system, tell it to lock down the door or close the door, whichever. Different systems have different terminology. Basically, make sure it's forced shut. And then at that point, re-trigger the schedule. That schedule will then re-trigger that relay, at which point the gate will open. So just kind of a little troubleshooting for if you run into power restarts on gates or roller doors. Pretty straightforward there. Yeah. All right. Now the final thing that we want to talk about today about power outages and alarm systems and camera systems and doors is one of our best practices. Now you can find the list of all my best practices on my website. So if you ever want to, you can go to ztiadvanced.com.au. I'm sure it's in the show notes somewhere. And we have a document that you can download, which is the best practices for your security system. There's a bunch of different things on there. So things like how to do walk tests and how to check your camera system for functionality and making sure that your after hours contacts are up to date. But near the end, there's one specific thing that most people just kind of, they think they know it, and then they go, when something bad happens, they go, I didn't actually do that. So one of the last things is know who your key holders are. So in the event of a cyclone or some other large power outage event, we're going to need to be able to get into site. So if you have electric fence or if you have a barbed wire on top, that becomes even more difficult. So if you have that case, make sure you have a pedestrian gate to your fence line that actually has a key. Make sure you have a door that goes into your building that uses a key. Make sure you have a door that gets to the comms room and wherever the security gear is that uses a key. And make sure that you have specific people who are known to your management that have that key. Whether it's a patrol company or my preference is to have key people within your company that actually have access to that key, that's the way to go. Now, there's don't fall into the trap of putting the keys in the comms room, right? So if you have a key safe in your comms room, awesome. But if you can't get to the key safe, that doesn't help anybody, right? So just keep that in mind. You have to have some way to get from outside on the street, through your gate line, through your access control doors, through the comms room door to get to the gear that we need to be able to fix any power issues. So just keep that in mind. Know who your key holders are, whether it's a key safe on the outside of perimeter or whether you have a secure key somewhere off site that somebody can bring, or if you have it held by the monitoring center or your security company. All of those are legitimate answers. Just make sure you have some answer. Similar to like when we talked about the password managers and previous things, there's different options that you can do. None of them are bad. Find one that works for you. All right. And if you do have questions on that, talk to your security consultant and they'll help you kind of guide your way through that. Obviously, I'm always around. You can talk to me. Everybody else has, if you have somebody that you specifically trust for your security, go to them. They'll be able to kind of guide you in the right direction. So, yeah. Now, that kind of covers all that I wanted to talk about the power outage. I wanted to kind of sit down. We didn't have a guest today because, again, cyclone. But I'll put the time-lapse footage in the background so you can see it. Honestly, not the most insanely interesting time-lapse video because it wasn't as strong as what I was expecting. But it's kind of cool to see. You can also see how a TIOC camera works at nighttime. It's definitely more visible than if you take like a photo with your phone. So yeah, and that's kind of cool. So thank you for sitting through me rambling on about power outages in your security system, and I hope you learned something. if you know somebody who would actually benefit from this knowledge, whether it's an integrator or an electrician or a business owner or a homeowner, please do me a favor and send them through the link to the podcast. Also, if you don't mind subscribing or following, that obviously helps because it's nice to see the numbers go up. It makes me feel good about myself, which quite honestly, I'm all about that. Anyways, you guys have a very good day. I'm going to watch it rain outside for a little bit because that's basically all I can do right now. And talk to you guys soon. So all of you stay safe. Thank you.